Okay, so today we're gonna be talking about credit repair. And Wayne is gonna talk to us about credit repair. You know what, Wayne, I would suggest using that bright green marker. That brown marker is very hard to see on the screen.
So yes, so I'm Wayne. You can call me Wayne. If you have questions, I prefer questions. I prefer to have a dialogue about it. It's more entertaining for me, and I would hopefully make it more entertaining for everyone else here. So to get started, we needed to define what credit is. So what is credit? What is credit? 1 second, I need to drink of water.
What?
Okay, Wayne's back.
Yeah,
You're gonna have to show the camera who you are again. Okay, we're good. And we're recording, go ahead.
Okay. Didn't follow me.
Yeah.
Did it turn blue?
Yes.
Okay. When you walked away, it went straight into the ceiling.
All right, sorry. Credit. What is credit? So credit is what usually a bank or a financial institution, they're saying that we will allow you to use this amount of money or this amount of resource. So what it does is it allows people to access resources that they can't otherwise do it on their own. Because if you wanted to buy, let's use an example of buying a house. If you wanted to buy a house and your house costs $100,000, how many people have $100,000 laying around? I'm like, I don't know, right? There's not a lot of people that have $100,000 laying around. So to be able to access the amount of resource that you need, the $100,000, that's what credit. So then the bank or the lending institution, how we're talking about this, is going to allow you to access $100,000 to buy that house. And that's what credit is, okay? Debt is a different thing, which we'll talk about next month, but more specifically, debt is when you accumulate debt when you use credit, okay? So credit is accessing, it gives you access to a resource, okay? Over time, as you prove that you're responsible enough to use a resource and pay it back to somebody, the amount that you have access to in terms of a resource goes up. Make sense?
Somebody also said online it's trust in exchange for goods and service.
It is, right? It is building trust with that entity, right? So you can use it for goods, services, usually goods, generally, sometimes services, but in most applications, we're talking about goods. So there's a responsibility that comes with that. And the more you can prove that you're responsible with that resource, the more you can access, right? So it's a balance of what can you realistically take advantage of and repay on a credit side. Two, if you use it, can you actually pay it back? Like that's really what credit is. And they're gonna say, I believe that you can pay back $10,000 based on all of the things that I know about you. We're gonna allow you to access $10,000 of resource. Now prove to us that you're responsible by using it and then making the payments back. Once you do that, then they say, well, That went well, so we're gonna do 15,000 now, or 20,000, or whatever that number might be. That's how credit works. That's what your credit score is measuring. Like, that's really what it's measuring. It's like, are you responsible enough to use the money that we're allowing you to access? Like, that's really what it comes down to. Questions about that? Okay, there's also credit is looked at differently depending on what it is. So if you're looking at a house, the way that the person that's gonna issue the credit to you is gonna look at that very differently than they're gonna look at it if you're buying a car. Or if you're gonna use it for some business purpose, right? Because what they want to, what ultimately what they're doing is they're going to assign a level of risk to you. What is the probability of you taking this money and using it in a way where you can then also continue to pay it back? So it's almost like an investment. It's like
What if you don't have credit? Or what if you've never had a credit card, never used a loan? Like, how can folks look into building that trust or get that started?
So generally, it's pretty easy to get a credit card. Credit card companies love irresponsible people because irresponsible people usually end up paying them back way more money than they initially used. That's how that game plays. So it's actually very easy to get a credit card for the vast majority of people. If you're responsible and you use your credit card appropriately, it becomes a very, very useful tool. So credit it's accessing a resource, but at some point it does become a tool for you to use. So if you have a credit card and you have a limit of $2,000 on there, if you use it and then you carry a balance, that is to your detriment, right? Because of the interest that you're going to pay on that. But if you use it and then you pay it off every single month, you don't ever pay interest. The credit card company is not incentivized. They don't want to incentivize you to pay it off because they will actually make less. So to access credit, although to access large amounts of credit is hard, to initially access credit is actually fairly easy, which is in smaller increments. Might start at $500, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. But you have to, I warn people because it is easy. It's very easy to abuse it then. To continuously access credit, and then now you have multiple lines of debt because it's easy to get it.
Could you give an example of if you used $1,000, say on that $2,000 credit limit, and the percentage was 19%? How much someone would actually pay if they had a minimum payment of, say, whatever that would be, $50 or whatever. But I think it'd be helpful for someone like me to see how much money we're wasting by only making a minimum payment.
Okay, so if you had credit of $2,000 and you used $1,000 of that, I'm gonna find a different. I'm gonna say 24% interest. Okay, so, and this is a little bit of an oversimplification of this, but for all intents and purposes. So if you're just making the minimum payment on this, your interest on this is 24%. That's not 24% every month. That's 24% over an annual. So if you didn't make any payments on it, it would add another $240 every year to this. So the minimum payment is likely going to be set to pay it off in 5 years. So the actual monthly payment on this, so you'd break this down into 12 payments. That's what, $20? That's an extra $20 a month that you're, mind you, like, it's not totally an advertising, like, there's more calculation, a little bit more complicated than that. But if this is spread out over 5 years, that's 60 months. So just to pay this off, it's about roughly $100 a month. It's actually a little bit less than that, but your payment will be at least $120 a month. So you're paying an extra $20 a month on the use of that. Is that
Yeah, so at that minimum payment, you're saying it would take how long?
5 years? But it's
5 years.
actually much longer than,
Yeah,
it's like,
You need credit cards to take a loan.
no. No, it's just an easy way to build build up your credit availability. If you're responsible. If you're responsible with how you use it. As long as you don't carry, the goal of using credit is, especially on credit cards in particular, is to not carry a balance over month. Okay, because they're gonna like,
What is the max for like credit card you can spend? that you're allowed?
depends on the person. So
Very common.
their income, their ability to pay back that money, like I
Well,
see
you vary like
millions. Like there's credit cards with credit limits that are hundreds of millions of dollars.
Some of the messages here that I'm seeing are how people grew up with the message that, oh, credit cards are bad, don't go there. How many people here grew up with that message? Don't do credit cards.
If collections,
You know?
you're good with collections, does that mean that credit?
That, so if you establish and negotiate an agreement with a credit agency, like a collector, we'll say a debt collector, that is beneficial to your credit, because what they want to see is that you are going to repay what you have. Okay, it hurts when you don't repay at all, right? And then also there's some other things that factor into it. But as long as you're making those payments, they're reporting on that to the credit agencies that generate your credit score, right? And if they're saying, oh, yep, on-time payments, they're coming in, right? That's beneficial to you and your credit.
Is it better to have a credit card or just a credit card?
Okay, so
That
this
way you
is
don't order.
right. So it's just more of a cybersecurity issue. Okay, I generally do not advise people to use a debit card. Okay, because when you use your debit card and somebody steals that information from you, they're not taking the bank's money, they're taking your money. Okay, if somebody steals your credit card and they're like, oh, you have a $2,000 limit, and they use the $2,000 on it, right? They're taking the bank's money. Right. So is a bank more likely to go after their money, or are they more likely to go after your money to get it back? They're more likely to go get their money.
This
They're more
literally,
incentivized to go.
They were helping me, so they were coming after my money. Okay?
Mhm.
And he said, you're right, took them a while, but
Yeah, they're gonna get their money back, right?
this literally just occurred this week down in Duluth. Members Credit Union. There were a couple handfuls of people whose debit cards got hacked, and because of the skimmer machines, they swiped, and then there was a fake skimmer on there that took all of that information. Now that person who had the skimmer now has access to that person's full bank amount. So their bank amounts went down to zero in no time. But I'm just saying, there's people out there who are criminal. And if you don't know what a skimmer looks like, you wouldn't know that you're putting yourself at risk. So that's where you're saying debit cards are attached directly to your full bank account, whereas credit cards are attached to the credit card's bank, so they're less likely to go after the bank versus your account.
Yes, exactly.
The other thing that I learned is with a credit card, say you're, just for ease of math, your total amount available is $900. You should not go above $300. You should always keep it a third of the available line of credit,
Yeah, I
or
mean,
make sure it's paid off at the end of each month.
yeah, the most important thing is to make sure that that you, obviously, in a perfect world, everyone has enough cash in an emergency reserve where they don't have to use a credit card for emergencies. Because that gets tricky to pay it off every month. If it's an emergency and you have to use a credit card, generally, it's hard to pay it off every month. But for assuming it's not for an emergency and you're just spending, you should not spend more on a credit card every month than what you can pay off every month. So if you can pay it off every month, that is very beneficial to your like building credit. Your credit score will go up, which means that you can access more credit in the future. So if you want to buy you need a new car, you need a house, right? All of those things matter. The credit score also matters in how much interest you end up having to pay, right?
I don't know this might be off a little bit, but if you take more on, is it better to do it within their exact payments, hold your credit, or pay it all off at once? Especially if it's small.
So generally speaking, is in your best interest to pay it off as fast as you can.
As you can.
Yeah.
Why, so you told me that, now that lady over there told me that, not that. So I guess maybe a lot of different views.
Well, so if we were talking, if you're talking about on a personal level, for people in their individual finances, is generally not in your best interest to carry a lot of debt, right? Obviously, if you have a mortgage and stuff, like that's on, but like we'll say there's like if it's not tied to something that's tangible, like a vehicle or a home or something, you do not want that kind of debt lingering around, and you want to pay it off as soon as you can. Okay, because generally the interest rates are way higher on it, which means that you're paying back your money for something that you bought. So if you, let's just say you bought a pair of jeans for $50 and you put it on a credit card, but you didn't pay it off every month, and you took you a year to pay it off, you just paid like $100 for that pair of jeans. Does that sound great? Does that make you feel good? Because it would make me want to throw
Like
up.
clothing stores, everything like that, right? Like,
Yeah.
say if you're going back to school, you're finding your kids a bunch of perverts on that card, then you pay, that's the same thing as the credit card, right?
Yeah, it is a credit card. So the goal would
I
be
just
to
thought it
use,
was for that store.
no, but you use that, then you pay it off. If you don't pay it off, those clothes just start getting really expensive over time.
Okay, question online. So if someone has a credit card but never uses it, is that still building credit, or do they actually have to use the card?
You so okay. So one thing that people don't realize is that
Oh, yeah.
Some card companies will close your account. if you're
Yeah.
using it.
it will, but it's also not good for your credit when you have credit available and you don't use it. Okay, so you should be, if you have one, you should be using it for things, but paying it off every month,
Yeah.
right?
So
Because if you have
want-
credit and you're not using it, it actually it is detrimental to your overall credit health, which can cause your credit score to go down if you're not using it.
So you should maybe go to the grocery store and spend $30 on groceries and pay it off at the end of, before it's due.
Mhm.
And that way you can build your credit line up.
Yeah, that will build credit. The
Your
other,
credit
the
score.
alternative will not.
Mhm.
But you have to wait for those, your printout or your bills to come?
No.
Or how do you do it? How do you?
So you could. I don't remember the last time I paid for a bill. That wasn't. But you should be able to. You can call or you can.
You're a little old school, but
Yeah.
yes. You
So-
can call. You can.
Today you can log in online and just pay it online.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hate going online. Like, what is it, that new credit place over by, all over there?
The North Star Credit Union.
Horrible, horrible.
Speaking of the $50 jeans though, I do have a retail credit card that I use, retail store. But when I use it, it's because I get a huge discount on
Yeah.
my clothes. And then they allow me to pay it off at the register right after I
Mhm.
check out.
So you have a time limit, right? You just need to pay it off.
Yeah.
So
How long do they give?
well, no, I mean, on a credit card, you generally they'll keep taking your interest as long as you're alive.
What's the highest interest that they can go?
I've seen 28%. What's the highest
Holy
you've
moly.
seen?
Much higher.
I heard
Much
like
higher?
7 to 8.
There are some laws in place, but sometimes like the people skirt around the law. And then they get in trouble and it's a whole thing. But yeah, they can go significantly higher than that. I've said that much higher. So I'm not even gonna tell you what that is. Just so the other thing is if you have, oh, go ahead.
Whenever it comes to using credit, would it be smart to use it to like, say, purchase a laptop or rather just save up for it?
Can you, two questions. Are you gonna use that laptop for productive purchase like work or school in this example? Then it's probably best to pay cash for it. If you're using it to make an investment in yourself, such as education, or if you need it for work purposes so you can earn something, that's different. Because it's more of an investment than just getting something for like just to be able to use. If you're just getting it because you just like want to be able to use it for something, you should really try, if you can, use cash for it. Otherwise, it's like I said before, like that computer might be, several $100s, and by the time it's all said and done, you paid $1,000 for it. By the time you pay it off, you probably need it.
Back in the day, they used to send credit cards in the mail to people. And so if you don't activate that card, does it show that you still have a card?
No, you have to activate it.
Right, okay, that was some of the questions going on here.
So the ones that they send now are not real.
No, they're not, they're
Yeah.
cardboard.
Yeah.
Give
So-
them to the grandkids.
So just clarify that, don't try to use those. They will not work. But yeah, no, a lot of them, there's chips in them in the cards and stuff now that you will receive. And if you notice when you get one, they're not marked with any branding of the company or anything. A credit card, if you get one in the mail, because then they don't get stolen.
So say everything's going great. You have a job, got this plan, you got a credit card, making your payments on time, all of a sudden you lose your job.
Mhm.
What can you do?
So first of all, always let's back up. So when things are going well, the temptation will be to spend what you have coming in. The first thing you need to do is set aside and build an emergency cash account and like a savings account. You need to build a savings account. So when undoubtedly something happens like job loss or some other emergency, you don't have to depend on a credit card or something else to allow you to survive whatever the circumstances are of that emergency. So an emergency reserve, and when I was still practicing, that was the first priority for every single person that I worked with, was ensuring that there was an emergency cash account set aside for them, so they wouldn't find themselves in circumstances where they had to use credit, because it's really hard to get out of those situations if you have to use credit for an emergency. Did I answer your question?
Almost.
Okay, what part did I miss?
The other part is obviously this is circumstantial, but let's just say it was the beginning of the pandemic again. Right? At that time, I was running a business. And so when you have such a large overhead, you have an emergency fund, but it really only covers a month and a half.
Right, so you burn it faster.
You do, and so then at that point, you still have lines of credit to answer for. I mean, I know what I eventually went through, but I was just wondering like what you would suggest for folks that may or may not have a business, maybe just have a personal credit card, what they can do in the event that they burn through the safety, like their emergency fund, so that they can avoid those going into collections or facing judgments.
Yeah, so one thing that generally takes, I'll get to your question in a minute. So generally takes time for it to go to collections and go to judgment. The best thing that you can do in those situations is contact and talk directly to the creditor, the person that you owe money to, because depending, like they generally speaking, I'm not saying all of them, generally they will work with you on to figure out how to navigate that, because they can do things like defer payments, defer interest, and do those types of things. So if you found yourself in that type of situation, the best thing that you should do is talk to the people that you owe money to. The natural inclination for us is to hide from it. The best thing that you can possibly do is to go directly to them, and you would be surprised at how much grace that some of these companies will actually have with you. Did that answer your question? Did that better? Okay.
Like, I was just talking to somebody the other day and they got a letter in the mail stating that, if they're late on their payments or whatever, that they will work with them and they have a credit card protection plan that will cover since they lost their job or bankruptcy or divorce or whatever. And they thought that was a really good, thing that they got in the mail stating, it was a surprise to them, basically, that everything will be covered since they have their job.
Yes. So as
and they will push out the payments, and those payments will be a little bit more eventually down the road that they're working with, and whatever they do come up with to pay some kind of payment, even though this protection plan is on, they will get that money reimbursed to them.
right. So the trick to that is they have to know that something happened.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it goes back to, you gotta just talk to them. If you talk to them, you will avoid so many problems.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, in life, avoiding stuff because it's uncomfortable is generally not the best path forward. And this is one of those situations where it's actually can be very, very detrimental to you. Because I've been on multiple calls with people who've called the credit card company and they're like, well, why didn't you tell us this 6 months ago? We could have done something. Now we're kind of past that point of being able to really do anything. So when it happens, the best thing is to communicate with whomever you owe the funds to. Any other questions?
What about if somebody has student loans from years past? Does that affect credit rating?
Yes. Yeah. Anything where you have taken money from someone else, probably an institution in this sense, your parents tend to be grandparents' parents tend to be a little bit more forgiving than a bank. Right. So if you've taken money, like taking money for school, you've taken money for a car, whatever those things are, if you're not paying back, like it negatively impacts You can't run from that.
I looked at my credit report.
Well,
I had a credit card when I was 21 years old.
Huh?
Now I had an express. I don't know how we must become, but oops.
you had a credit card when you were 21 years old, and you're wondering if it's still there.
Is it still? Is my credit report?
Did you pay it off?
No.
Then it's probably
Oh,
still there.
46 now. That was one from-
So
Usually that stuff traces, you have to get a hold of like Equifax or.
yeah,
One
like
of those credit bureaus. And they
I
do
would be
3 of them.
shocked if it disappeared. There are some instances where credit companies will write off debt that has gone past a certain period. That's a policy thing. It depends on the company and what it's for. I would
Perfect test. What do you mess up? I don't know.
so might be lingering.
There's a way to check though.
Yeah, you can check on that.
You have free report, one free report. Credit karma. You can go through any of the reporting.
Or creditreport.com.
Or you can go to the credit bureau downtown. Range Credit Bureau.
Yeah, but if it was back then, and if it's still there, it's
They might charge that.
This one time though,
huh?
this one time.
That was a very expensive pair of jeans. So that was a very expensive apartment.
Wow.
It's the equivalent of a Manhattan flat now today.
So then you basically maxed it out.
Yeah, I didn't have credit.
So as it pertains to repairing credit, so I mentioned one thing is to have, so you have to use credit to repair credit, right? So having responsible habits and not overspending on credit card, getting a credit card and doing some monthly spending on it and then paying it off every month is a really easy way to build credit, right? It's the most common way, but ultimately it's making sure that you make payments on stuff. If you can't afford to purchase something without using credit, then you really need to step back and question whether it is the right time for you to make that purchase. Because at the end of the day, you have to define what is a need and what is a want. Right? If it is a need and you have to use credit for it, like a real need. Fundamentally, as human beings, what are the 3 things that we need?
Water, shelter.
Shelter. We'll put water and food. We'll just tuck it under there.
Clothing?
Hmm?
Has to be clothing?
Clothing, yes. Otherwise, everybody would be freezing today. Everybody would walking around naked, being really cold. Sounds pretty unpleasant. Fundamentally, those are the only 3 things that we need.
Personal hygienist stuff.
Do you need that?
Well, yeah, to stay clean.
Oh, yeah. Hygiene. She said hygiene.
Yes, hygiene products.
Would you die? Would you die if you didn't have if you didn't have shampoo and bar soap?
Yeah.
Probably would.
I can't stand it.
I'm probably-
Find stuff like personal hygiene.
I have to go curl this corner
Personal hygiene. Hospital bills.
It could, but people lived for a very, very, very long time without ever using soap. Huh?
Question.
Oh,
Okay, so if somebody has 2 different or 3 different cards out there that are in arrears that they owe big bucks on, should they do a consolidation program into one lump sum with the company? And how do you, if that's suggested?
Maybe, but
use?
we are getting into next month.
Mhm.
Okay, maybe. Sometimes that makes sense. Sometimes it doesn't. It depends on the circumstances of each of the debt. Because the best strategy for dealing with that if you don't consolidate, and there's resources, if somebody is in that situation, there are a lot of really good companies that can help you consolidate that. But the one mistake that people make is they try to pay down all of their debts at one time. They try to sprinkle a little extra money on all of them at once. That doesn't work well. It doesn't work well. If you're serious about paying down your debt and you want to pay it down fast, is you make the minimum, you find the one. Okay, there's two things, but the best way to do it is to find the one with the highest interest rate. So if you have one that has 24%, 19%, and you have, let's just say, 21%. You want to pay the one that's 24% off first because that's costing you the most. Okay, so let's just say the minimum payment on this one is $100. This one is $90, and this one is $120. Oh. You want to pay this one off first because it's the highest interest rate. So let's just say you have, what was that? 10. I'm gonna change this thing. 300. So 300 total. Let's say you have $350 to put towards your debt every month. Let's just throw that out there. So you have an extra $50 every month to apply to the debt. What people generally think is the best course is to pay 125, 100, and then 125, and they sprinkle it on. The goal would be to take this $50 and dump it on the highest interest debt, and you focus on one debt at a time. Then, so if you're putting $150 on this debt, that's right here, once that's paid off, you now have an extra $150 every single month. The goal of it would be to take this and snowball it on top of the next highest interest rate one. So now instead of paying $120 on that one, you are paying $270 on that one. And it will start to disappear a lot faster. Okay, so once that one's paid off, now how much do you have? Anyone? $150 plus $120.
Exactly.
That's right.
$270. $270. Now you take that, and now you're paying $350 on this one, and it's going to disappear much faster. It's the best way to get out of debt. Now, if you're in a situation where this number is way higher than $350, that's when you probably need to take a look at a company that can help you consolidate the debt into one loan, because they can help negotiate better terms on that. Okay, they can help that they will talk to the creditors, and they can negotiate lower payments, and you can make one payment to them, and then ultimately they're going to do this for you. So your payment will get lower, and you'll be able to, they'll take care of handling this for you. But ultimately, this is what they're going to do with it. They're going to negotiate lower payments, these minimums down, and they're going to set, this is how much you got to come up with. They're going to take that, and then they're just going to do this. Did that answer your question, Diane?
Yes,
It's very long.
yep, that answers the question.
I like scenarios. So say you have a few cards you didn't pay for years, like what Melissa had mentioned about the old credit card, and she does find it. How do you begin to start repairing credit? Is there a way to negotiate with creditors? Is there a way?
Yes, there is. So Okay, so creditors, so especially if it's gone to collections, you can always negotiate. They're incentivized by collecting on this. I'm gonna give you an example of how this works. When I got out of college, I worked for 1 day for a collection company. 1 day.
That's all you made it?
It was horrible.
Oof. That'd be a tough job.
Yeah, 1 day. I'm like, it wasn't for me. Let's say by the time it gets to collections, you owe $1,000. Okay, so you owe $1,000 to them. Okay. Do you know how much that collections agency probably paid for that?
Less.
Like $10.
I'm just gonna estimate. They probably paid $300 for it. Because they make their money in the difference. That's where they make their money, right? So if you know that, it's a negotiation, right? And they're perfectly fine taking payments or in a lump sum. So if you have debt that went to collections and you have to deal with the debt collections company, always negotiate it with them, because what they're saying you owe is not what they actually need to get to make money on it. It just so happens that the person that you're talking to on the other side of the phone, on the other side, is incentivized and they're paid based on this. You'll often hear like, well, I can make $50 payments on that. You know, I can pay back $500. I can make $50 payments on that. Then you'll hear, well, let me bring this to my manager. All they're saying is that enough margin for them? Because their commission is going to come out of that, and then the company itself is going to retain some of that, right? So if you have money in collections, if they say you owe them $1,000, likely you probably, if it's in collections, whatever the bill was, let's say it was $1,000, what you probably actually used was probably like $400.
This actually does work. Speaking from experience, I was working with someone who, a couple of years ago, who owed money. And so we called and we were able to get that balance knocked down. And he was stockpiling this money to purchase a house. So in order to buy the house, he needed to get rid of all this debt. So he put it towards that. He got a nice deduction in the total balance, and he is now in his own house.
Yeah. So if they say you owe $1,000, offer them $300. If they say we can't do that, say, well, the most I can do is $500.
Mhm.
And I can start making $50 payments starting today.
Are they more willing to make that kind of a deal if you pay it all off at once?
You can get lower if you can pay it all off at once. You'll get a way better.
You'll
deal.
get it. Yeah, that's what he did.
Because the person that you're talking to on the phone gets their commission immediately. That's how that game works. Okay, so if you do settle in this way, you will take a hit on your credit initially, right? There's a settlement that happens. Oftentimes the difference gets passed through to you and it's like a taxable event. Okay, so you will show like on your income taxes, you will have to claim that. But generally speaking, it is in your best interest to take that hit on your credit score because you're gonna pay way less and you're gonna get rid of it. If you can get rid of it, that's the most important thing, because then you can start building back up from there.
So what did you not like?
Why? I didn't really like calling people and trying to convince them that they were magically gonna come up with the amount of money that they needed to pay back.
That makes sense. That's all it is.
Yeah, it was also a very strange environment where people kind of walked around like they were rock stars, you know, and wasn't that exciting to me. People, you're really like going and trying to collect from people that put themselves in pretty precarious situations a lot of times. Like there's like a you just have a never ending list of people to collect on, varying amounts. And yeah, like you can make a lot of money doing that stuff, but for me personally, I'm not all that motivated by money itself. And yeah, I could made a ton of money doing that, but wasn't really in alignment with what I'm about, what I'm doing. So that's really why, like, this is not gonna work for me. So so the best way to repair your credit is to take care of any debts you have, and then start to use credit wisely. Easiest way to do that is to get a credit card and make sure that you're paying it off every month. That is the cleanest, easiest way for you to build credit. One, take care of the things that are lingering out there, and two, start using credit in small increments instead of trying to do something big right away, because you'll overextend yourself. Okay. Once you do that for a while and you build up some more resources over time, then you step up and maybe get a car and you make the payments on the car. Not a Rolls Royce or a Ferrari. Ford Focus will do, right? And then you just keep building that up and doing that, right? But also, it's very, very, very important to just in general to have cash on hand, call it, whether that's in the savings account or generally invest in savings account. Saves are okay, but definitely not under your mattress. But having cash emergency reserves sitting there, so because things will come up. Have any of you ever had to deal with a financial emergency?
Jail. Wow, that happens.
Right.
I'll
Yeah. So it's a habit thing, right? Also, just broadly, like having a healthy relationship with money, because I think for a lot of people that I've worked with in the past, one of the biggest issues is scarcity. And then once you have it, the feeling that it's never coming back, right? And if you get stuck in a scarcity mindset, you will undoubtedly find yourself in situations dealing with credit and debt, or dealing, you end up causing scarcity, right? So being disciplined enough to really stay in, like, is this a need, is this a want, right? If when people can be disciplined in that, that's really how you get ahead in this. So you'd be surprised, if you think of really what you think, have this perception of what really wealthy people look like, because you see it on TV all the time. They're driving a Lamborghini, driving a Ferrari, they live in a 20,000 square foot house in Malibu, whatever that is. Those are not wealthy people. there's a lot of wealthy people that are driving around on the streets here, and they drive very simple vehicles, and they live in very simple houses, they live very simply, but they don't really have to worry about money or resources. They don't even, the fear of not having something doesn't exist in them. They live within their means. They don't do things that are like lavish because they manage their needs and their wants, right? Can they afford a Ferrari? Yes. Do they need a Ferrari? No. Do they care about a Ferrari? No. So they don't buy a Ferrari because they're not trying to keep up with it.
We've got a deck of cards for anybody who wants to use them called Money Habitudes. And it looks at your attitudes and your habits towards money. I think we should do that again soon. To look at, is it all about status? Is it about, are you a giving person? What is your attitude and your habits? So if that sounds like something people would, oh, yeah, somebody said, yep, coolest cards ever. So if anybody is interested in doing that, come on over to the office. You can do it anytime. And you will get credit. You will get credit for doing it towards your self-investment hours.
We did it the last time, we had a lot of people that did it.
Yes. We've got lots of cards. I ordered a bunch more, so.
So the other thing is, like, you can't be afraid of using credit. You just can't.
You can if you don't have the money to pay back what you're,
Well,
Right.
and what I'm saying is, like, there are times when it will undoubtedly, like, you will want, it'll be in your best interest to use it. Like, we all come across those situations.
Especially for when you're buying a car or if you're getting a house loan.
So you can't be afraid of it, which means you have to be disciplined, right? Especially with the credit card, you shouldn't be afraid of credit cards because it's a tool that it's a very, very, very useful tool when it's used as a tool. So you can't fear it, but you have to be disciplined and responsible enough once you have it and start using it to not step outside of the rules of how you're going to use it as a tool and turn it into something that it's not.
So soon we're gonna be they're saying we're gonna be a cashless society, no more cash. Does that mean like everybody has to have credit cards? Or
So that is,
I don't know if it's gonna be our generation. But
I think, so here's the thing, like, to go completely cashless is in the next like 2 generations is probably unlikely, but yeah, it would be credit card, debit card transactions, or Apple Pay, or however you want to define that. Because today it's very easy to just cover your phone and pay.
Well, like my dad said, in the future, he's been gone for 4 years, but he was telling me things, he said that he knows that the world's gonna come into this someday where they're gonna give everybody something inside their skin and they're gonna monitor what everybody eats, what everybody buys and things like that, and it'll come back to that.
They already do that
I mean, it's,
without the chip though.
yeah, and he said that that's what's gonna be, there will be no money someday, there'll be nothing, and that will be the thing that you have to use.
even if you got that credit, you have to.
It will not be no more cash.
I'm not worried about this.
Everybody uses
Bad
their phones
credit.
to.
Yeah, but right, but over time you can build that back up. Right? It's not a hopeless thing. It just requires discipline, responsibility, and to do the things, right? Like,
Actually, the only credit I got, I guess, is paying rent. I've been there a couple of years.
I don't
I'm
know.
steady.
Yeah.
And I never looked at that part.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Right.
But it's like child support, a lot of that, go back there.
and those are all like, just be steady with it and consistent with it, just like you are with your rent, right? Because it helps you build credibility, and then you can start working your way out of it. But if we don't if we set aside things and pretend like they're not there, doesn't mean they don't go anywhere. Right? So there's always a way to move forward. Sometimes it's just hard. So the longer we hide from it, the harder it gets. So it's my unsolicited advice would be just to kind of take it head on, find a way. There is a way. It's just not the most simple usually sometimes, or the easiest.
The way I look at it is credit cards are kind of a practice run for those bigger purchases that you may want in the future, like a car, like a home. We should also talk a little bit about how a high credit score also affects your insurance rates. And what else does it positively affect if you've got a high credit score?
Yeah, I mean, it really, I mean, it's like you said, insurance rates, car insurance, home insurance, renter's insurance, all of those things, because it's reflective of your ability to make the payments. That's what your credit card is. It's showing what is your, it's a measure of how good is your work. Okay. If I say I'm gonna do something, and then I do it, my word is worth something. If I say I'm gonna do something and then I don't do it, my word isn't worth anything, right? That's what your credit score is measuring, right? So when it comes to anything where it's a longer term contract, like insurance, you're gonna get better deals on those things if your word is worth something, and the only way for anyone to measure that is through your credit score. I'm gonna give you my word that I'm gonna pay you this thing. It's like a handshake agreement. That's what it is. That's what it's measuring. It's a measurement of a handshake agreement. If you do this, I'm gonna do this. That's really what it is. So credit, accessing credit is a contract. Getting insurance, it's a contract. Those are all contracts. So anytime there's a contract involved, they want to know how good is that handshake that you just made. What else? Any questions? Thoughts? Concerns? What questions do you have? Let me reframe it. Are you feeling nervous? Are you feeling uncomfortable because I just pointed at you and said you off?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
This is my own planet. So no.
Anything? I don't know. About anything?
I was thinking like some reason, I was always told bad credit. I was always told it's bad to have a credit card was because of Dave Ramsey, that's part of my classrooms in high school, the financial side.
Yeah, what are your thoughts about Dave Ramsey?
I think that Dave Ramsey has this is where is it?
Did you just say Dave Ramsey?
This is
Yes.
Dave.
I love this stuff.
So do I.
This is Dave Ramsey.
Mhm.
I have more info if anyone wants it.
So
I paid for it, you guys can use it.
yeah.
Okay, some people might not know who we're talking about. Can you?
So Dave Ramsey is a person that developed call it financial education resources. I believe it's Financial Peace University. There's a ton of useful content and a lot of valuable learning. I would most value specifically his budgeting and his approach to dealing with debt. Beyond that, giving broad advice to anything beyond the budgeting and the debt side doesn't account for a lot of nuance that have in individual situations, which yes, circumstances and have
You can only see.
It was getting you right here. Now we see your face. No, you're good now.
Okay. But when there's some things that he gets, he steps into that are
Okay, sorry about
Sorry.
that.
no, it's okay.
Okay, guys, we're back on
So
track.
anyway, so
Sorry, Wayne.
no, it's okay. Outside of budgeting and debt, the topics that are touched on, there's more nuance involved in those things, particularly on the insurance and the investment sides of things. There's more involved, and it's not as simple as it's laid out to be in there. And it also, it's not sound advice for everyone. So that's where I stand on Dave Ramsey. But when it comes to the budgeting side of things and the debt side of things, like very, very good stuff. When it and this is the nuance part where I don't agree with him on the credit card side of things. Because like it eliminates the use of it as a tool. And it's a very, very useful, valuable tool that if you sit in a place where it's not on the table for you to use, you're limiting your access to important resources. So resources are important. We in general all have issues accessing the resources we need to do what we want to do as it is. So, and that means a lot of things. It's not just money. A lot of times for people it's money, resources. But there's other things as well. Sometimes it's opportunity or the opportunities that we want, right? If we want to do a particular type of work, sometimes that doesn't exist where we want it to. And it would require us to make significant changes in our lives, whether that be moving or settling for something that is okay instead of great.
That's the reason I ended up in the cities for almost 6 years. Yeah, for the job.
Do it. Any of you have a job?
People really ever get out of this?
Do people?
Sure.
You say
Yeah.
I win the lottery.
that.
Well, and then what is that called when if somebody does go to take out a loan or to purchase a house, they look at your income versus your debt ratio?
Income to debt ratio.
Mhm.
What I want to touch on. What would you need to get out of debt? How much money would you need to make? How much money would you need to make over the next 5 years to get out of debt?
So probably like, I don't know. Like thousands of child support. Really my own debt right there.
So,
And I'm student loans are low, it's like 9.
Right.
That's what I found.
so that's so if you don't take it head on, it's unsurmountable, right? Right? You're standing, you're looking at a mountain, it's like I could never climb up that mountain. Right? It's like if you're treading water, you're swimming and you're treading water, and you're like, oh, I don't know how much longer I can do this. And then somebody else, stand up. And then you stand up and you're like, well, I guess it's not so bad. Right? That's the equivalent. Right? It's unsurmountable because you're like staring at it and you're like, well, whatever, instead of confronting it. Right? Because like, what amount of money would it take over a 5-year period of time to take care of that? If you can answer that, now you know what potential next steps you can make. Or maybe it's 10 years, or maybe it's 15 years. Doesn't matter really what that timeline is, that's for yourself. Right.
But I get it.
But I could help you with that. And we could probably figure out in like 5 minutes
Yeah.
what that number is, right?
A
But
couple kids that have full child support. The people was like just forgiving me for it because they know it's like impossible. They know I'm not gonna they know I'm not gonna pay it. Some of it I'm forgiven for, but I still got a chunk.
but you can take those, like, you just have to identify what it is that you have to do it, right? If you take the steps to figure out that, then you can start making decisions. Until you do that, you can't make any decisions, which means it's just gonna be there until it's not there, which is ultimately when you die. But you had a question?
I forgot what it was.
Sorry.
That was a good question.
I think a good starting point would just be to identify your budget. What income are you taking in each month? What are your expenses and what do you have left? And I know we've done that in this class before, and maybe it's time to do that again. But ultimately, what does it boil down to? You have to have more income than expenses to get ahead. So,
In your opinion, is it bad to have a credit card or?
No, my opinion is no.
how about
If-
top it up?
Right. If, with the caveat that you are disciplined and responsible enough to use it as a tool. If you're not disciplined or responsible enough to use it as a tool, then it's a terrible idea.
Big one. I think Johnny on the spot with those payments. I don't think I did. Wrong people get those things. And then I put maximum credit. And then they don't.
But comes back to being responsible and having discipline, right? They're not using it as a tool, they're using it to just,
Rather have a grand.
wow, I have access to all this money. I'm gonna do whatever. I'm gonna eat steak. I'm gonna buy that Louis Vuitton bag, whatever it is. I don't have a Louis Vuitton bag.
I just heard something very disappointing the other day from someone who said, oh, my, I don't know what it was, income from the county just doubled. So now I have more money to get something very frivolous. It wasn't a need, it was a want. And, in those situations,
Yeah.
it's,
But that's a good example. If you're in those circumstances, it's probably not in your best interest to go buy a TV or get a new tattoo.
right,
It's in your best interest to put it aside until you need it for something that can either make more for you or something that you need or an emergency. It's way more valuable than the TV or the tattoo or the whatever it is.
Get more of what you need, like food.
Yeah.
right.
Happy.
Yeah. Like good food, right?
Yeah.
Why not have some good food? Because the stuff you put in your mouth is the stuff that drives the whole body into the head, right? If you put bad stuff in, bad stuff's gonna happen inside. Right? So that's more valuable as well.
Well, and now with the government being kind of up in the air and looking at potential cutbacks, there's discussion about some of the county funding going away. So now is the time to start stowing away your money like a little squirrel, so you have an emergency funding.
Coffee cans in the
Leave your
ground.
coffee cans in the
Yes,
house.
Start
coffee,
burying the
yes,
money in the
bury
ground.
those coffee cans.
Just put it in the bank. Just
There
put it
you
in a
go.
savings account.
But what if the banks ever go out? Then your money's stuck
What-
at the bank.
What's so what would have, okay, let's have a real conversation about what you just said. What would have to happen for the banks to disappear?
Well,
Hmm?
the Great Depression.
So if the banks disappear, are you concerned about what's in the bank account?
Yeah.
Why? It's not worth anything that's in there anyway. You're more concerned about where the heck are you gonna find food? Not buy food, because it doesn't, in that situation, you're not concerned about buying food, you're concerned about finding food. Like that's a catastrophic event. That is like an asteroid hits the earth type of situation. So the probability of that happening is fairly low. What's more probable is that you have it in a coffee can and somebody finds the coffee can and then the coffee can disappears. Or you put it under your mattress and your house burns down. I had a client one time. They had $60,000 under their mattress. They're very upset when their house burnt down. Because they were afraid that the banks were gonna fail.
I don't put it in a fire safe.
Hmm?
Fire safe, you could have money at home.
But why not just put in savings account?
Well, what if the bank crashes?
What if the house burns down? Those fireproof safes are useless. Just saying, I know that from experience.
If it's an electrical fire,
Yeah,
Put the money in the bank, child support gonna take all of it.
You
So
might
if
as well
I'm
just
on
keep it up.
a child benefits paid directly.
there you go. Yes, and get that debt down. We got a question here. What about for a person with no credit? Okay, okay, what's the first step? What is the easiest credit card to get or something simple to start them out to build their skills? Oh, with no credit, no debt. Like this person is not in the line of credit.
yeah, so.
The credit
there's-
bureau
in
doesn't
the-
know.
To define what is the best one to start with, I would actually defer to going into a bank. Like having, so the first step I would say is develop a banking relationship. If you don't already have one, if you do have one, I would go into the bank and get a credit card issued through that bank to start with a low limit on it.
Does it matter if it's a credit union or a bank?
Does not
No
matter.
preference. Okay, there we
I
go.
mean,
That's
credit,
been a question.
credit unions are generally going to have
$5 or $10 to open up at a credit
yeah,
union. That's it.
they'll have a little bit better terms for you to
Mhm.
deal with long term. I would urge you to start there. Do not start at a large bank. Like, for example, like Wells Fargo, US Bank, Bank of America, whatever, don't start there because there's a whole thing that you have to manage with your bank accounts there. So I would say start with a community bank, a smaller community bank, or credit, and then get a low limit credit card through them, through that lending or that financial institution, whether it's a bank or a credit. That's where I would start.
Okay, this person was saying that in the past, tried that, and First National doesn't do that. So do they have to develop showing demonstrating that they have a certain amount in the bank before the,
Then you go a little bit bigger bank.
yeah, okay. So in that situation,
Yeah, so if, I'm assuming they're not gonna go First National Bank in Chisholm.
yes.
So they would wanna
you're
go
right.
to a little bit bigger bank. If they can't, try credit union, there's North Star, there's, I mean, you are, what's American Bank now?
NBC?
So NBC would be a good place, they're great
Or
bank,
Bank America.
No, we're talking local
local.
banks, brick
see-
and mortars.
Yeah, so,
Oh, I don't know what that bank
what,
is.
what is American
US Bank?
No, American Bank, what are they now? I can't remember.
Oh, boy.
National Bank.
No, but
No,
good guess. It's, what is it? Park State.
Oh, there we
that's
go.
it. I was just gonna ask my cousin, because he goes there.
So if they live in Chisholm, I'd try Park State.
No, lives in Hibbing now, but
Oh,
yes,
okay.
that
So
was
Security
his
State
past
Bank,
life. Yeah,
NBC,
Northridge.
Northridge Credit Union,
Hibbing Credit Union.
Haven Credit Union.
Okay,
About security. Same thing.
Security State Bank?
That's how you should catch it.
Oh, the cash taxes too, something, the check cash. Not so fifty, it's 10 something, it's $11.
there are some banks that if you are a student, you can get a student account that they require you having less of a minimum in your bank account. Otherwise, some of them are like, you have to have a minimum of $300, and for some people, they're like, I can't afford that. And then they get hit with service charges.
Is anyone here in school right now?
No. But there will be people viewing this who are students.
Anything else?
He said, thanks, I'll check around. At least I know First National didn't, but.
Yeah.
Too small, too local.
Is that like the check cash?
You mean,
Cousin too,
really?
check cash machine there too.
Well, some
Any-
say he's gone.
Maybe if they say they wanna make money, let's go from $1 up to $3 up.
Any other questions? Was this helpful?
Yeah,
Yeah, so now everybody knows how to repair their credit
somewhat.
and how to give yourself a more positive credit score,
What?
line of credit.
One little slip up.
So how would you put this into a nice tidy little nutshell package as to how to repair credit and how to improve your score,
Okay.
or how to start a score?
Be disciplined in responsibility and be able to hold yourself accountable. Like, that's the most important thing. Establish an emergency reserve fund. Okay, that's really important because you can do all the work you want on your credit score, your credit. If something happens, it can derail the whole thing. Okay, so gotta have emergency reserves. Okay, once you have that set aside, so when something will come up, so you don't have to use a credit card or credit for that purpose of solving that problem. The next thing would be to get a very small limit credit card and start using it as a tool. Do a little bit of spending on it, pay it off. Do a little bit of spending on it, pay it off every month, every month, every month.
Right away, not right away, pay it off.
Okay,
Right? So you guys have set some rules. That's the easiest way and best place to start.
sounds great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And also online said thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.